In college classes across the world, young people are taught that there is no truth. Ironically, this statement itself is making a claim as to what is true. And if it is true that there is no truth, then the statement itself is false. Understanding this basic chain of reasoning is the starting point of understanding logic. And logic is how the discerning mind comes to know what is actually true. This is important because we all have a worldview. We all have ideas of what is true and what is not true, what is possible and what is not possible. The problem is that only one worldview can be correct, and that is the correct worldview. See, this is necessarily true because the incorrect worldview cannot be the correct worldview. A thing cannot be both correct and incorrect at the same time. Similarly, a car cannot be blue and not blue at the same time. A man cannot be running and not running at the same time. These are contradictions. Contradictions are two opposing statements, which means that they are opposites. They oppose one another. As we apply this to reality, a person cannot be both alive and dead at the same time and in the same sense. It is one thing to say that a man is both alive physically and dead spiritually at the same time, but this is not in the same sense. One sense refers to the physical, and the other refers to the spiritual. So we see by this example that contradictions cannot exist in reality, and therefore contradictions that we come across in reality must be identified in order to pursue the correct worldview. Therefore, when we come across a contradiction, we have only three options. Either one statement is true or the other is true, but not both, and both can be false. This again exemplifies the law of non-contradiction. Thinkers as early as Aristotle were able to recognize this truth, but long before Aristotle, men knew this to be true from even the moment Adam was created. He could not both exist and not exist at the same time and in the same sense. The law of non-contradiction is one of the four basic principles of logic, and it is so valuable to discerning what is true that the great enemy of God, whatever you may call him, has made sure that people ignore it and live in contradiction and argue from contradictory standpoints, and they don't see anything wrong with it. At times, I will engage people who will make brazenly contradictory statements, and when approached with their contradictions, they'll simply say, "I don't see it." And I imagine a man standing on the train tracks of logic. A train is coming his way, ready to destroy his position as I plead with him logically, "Move out of the way." But he says to me, "I don't see it." Truth is no exception. Truth comes hurling at us like a train, yet we cannot see it because our worldview is incorrect. We have developed a worldview that allows us to accept contradictions and think nothing of it. Rather than question our own position, we dig in our heels and question the position of others. We allow ourselves to hold on to contradictory positions, and it's okay. But the moment someone else's position contradicts our own, we become deeply, deeply offended by their ignorance. Interesting. Let me give you an example. So someone might say abortion is okay because the child cannot live without the mother at that stage in their development. Yet that same person will have a 6-month-old child and agree that killing that child would be wrong. This is a contradiction because the 6-month-old can no more survive without the mother than can the 3-month-old fetus. Yet that position of contradiction is okay for them to hold on to. But the moment you contradict them and say abortion is wrong, they are deeply offended by your position. I find this fascinating and deeply, deeply troubling. A thing cannot be both true and not true at the same time. So what we as thinking adults have the challenge to do is discover what is true and what is not true in order for us to develop the correct worldview. This does not mean that all we have to do is discover good arguments for what is true and what is not true. No, the debate on God's existence or whether abortion is good or bad has great minds on both sides, both forming arguments as to its rightness or wrongness, its correctness or its incorrectness. Unfortunately, today more than ever, our leaders know so much about the world, but we as a population know very little about logic. As a result, we believe in falsehoods and we love every minute of it because we would rather live in contradiction, which is at worst to say we live in a lie, or at best to say we live illogically, than to admit that we are wrong. Most people will not point out your contradictions because they have become so imbecile that they don't recognize them. I am not one of those people. Instead, my goal is to examine your position and look for contradictions because when I find them, I know I have identified a point in your belief system that could not possibly be true. It is at this juncture where you must decide whether you are the imbecile or the Aristotle. Will you recognize your contradiction in wisdom and contemplate your position, or will you dig your heels into ignorance and commit to your folly and self-deception? The train is barreling down on you. You can't do both. That would be a contradiction. For more information on the law of non-contradiction, please view the following links. This is Owen Hemsath, The Apologetic. To hear more from Owen Hemsath, please find me on Facebook, YouTube, or WordPress. Just search for Owen Hemsath or The Apologetic.